Last week, when my family was here from the United States, we talked a lot about the weather. I met them at the airport in a short-sleeved shirt, but they spent the first few days here clinging to radiator after radiator wherever they went. They couldn't believe how cold it was, while I thought the country had come up trumps, weather-wise. The sun was shining and it was like 14 degrees day after day. But later in the week, something was different. I noticed that they started wearing fewer layers of clothing. A spring had come back into their step. They were happier because they were warmer. I was sure this was all in their heads. It wasn't warmer, like demonstratively. It was the same temperature on Saturday that it was on Tuesday. I checked. Ah, they said, but the wind. And it turns out that my family were right. Compared to earlier in the week, the wind had dropped, and that made a difference. There's a name for this phenomenon, of course: wind chill. Wind changes how people experience temperature. And it's not just in someone's head. You see, the human body is constantly generating heat. On a still day, a thin layer of warmer air builds around the skin. That layer acts a bit like a coat. But then the wind comes and strips that coat-like layer away, and the body loses heat without it. So the air temperature actually feels colder. The thermometer can say one thing, but the wind changes how it feels. In today's reading, wind and breath feature as a changing force. They change the atmosphere. They change what people are experiencing. In Acts, the disciples began to speak in other languages. In John, they receive the Holy Spirit. Wind and breath clearly make a difference. But exactly how wasn't immediately obvious. Some people looking on thought the disciples were drunk. To look at them, not much else seemed different. A breeze couldn't have done that much. And perhaps I made that same mistake with my family last week. At first, I assumed they were just tired from traveling, or perhaps simply not used to Scottish weather. But they were experiencing something real. A lot of people talk about experiences of the Holy Spirit as something that comes like fire, something overwhelming, euphoric, supernatural. And I don't doubt that there are experiences that some people have that are like that, and that God's Spirit does cause dramatic things to happen. But one might question what happens when those things don't. What happens when the numbers don't seem to change? When the dial stays exactly where it was? When addiction doesn't go away? When cancer doesn't remit? When someone's depression keeps lingering? Is nothing happening? Is God not there? Is the Spirit absent? Perhaps it's worth remembering how wind works. Yes, a violent wind may come sweeping through, bending and breaking things in its path, even spreading fire. But the wind's effects may also, at times, be less obvious. Although the room is still locked, the disciples still in that same world, although no one fully understands what's going on, although nothing about the political situation has changed, although right now it might seem like God isn't making any difference in the world, God is. It doesn't take something like a tornado or a typhoon. God's Spirit, like the wind, is able to change the conditions of life and how they are experienced, even when the thermometer reads the same number.